Imagine waking up and the world is immediately upside down. Not figuratively, literally. You open your eyes, your alarm clock is ringing, you have a crucial 5 a.m. train to catch,
Right.
but you can't move. You look down and you realize you are no longer human. You are, in the preposterous, horrifying words of the text, transformed in his bed into a horrible vermin.
And that, right there, is the instant crushing weight of Franz Kafka's 1915 masterpiece, The Metamorphosis. It's a premise so immediate, so resistant to logic or explanation, that it instantly tests, and expands the reader's ability to suspend disbelief.
It really does. And this deep dive is our journey into this dense, unsettling, and powerful novella. We are plunging into one of the greatest works of magical realism and allegory.
Definitely.
We'll be focusing on its tight, terrifying plot, the cruel psychology of his characters, and the profound, unsettling themes that have made it such a modern classic.
Yeah.
Our mission today really is to figure out exactly why this story still leaves readers feeling, well, unsettled and unsatisfied over a century later. What is it imprinting on us about modern life?
Well, if we get straight to the core conflict, what we find isn't just a horror story, though it is horrifying. It's a profound human struggle. The fight to find and express one's own identity in a world that feels dominated by these ever-present, all-consuming obligations.
Obligations, yeah.
The story suggests that sometimes the institutions and the demands of the world we live in make it absolutely impossible to truly express that identity. And maybe even worse, to have it understood by the people closest to you.
That's chilling. Okay, let's unpack this shocking setup, starting with that iconic first sentence. Gregor Samsa, our protagonist, a traveling salesman, awakens to find he's no longer a man, but this grotesque creature.
And the narrator doesn't ease us into it at all. There's no preamble.
No. We are immediately confronted with the physical reality. His armor-like back, his brown belly slightly domed and divided by arches into stiff sections, and his many legs pitifully thin.
That initial physical description is so crucial because it confirms, without a doubt, no, he is not dreaming. This isn't figurative language. This is real, physical, and grotesquely absolute.
But here is where it gets really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And where Kafka pulls the rug out from under you as a reader.
Yeah.
Gregor's reaction. It's not shock or existential horror at his new form.
Not at all. He actually dismisses the transformation almost immediately as nonsense.
Wait, that's the question that always hangs over this opening. If you become an unspeakable bug, why isn't your first thought panic or just raw horror? Why does Kafka make Gregor's immediate concern so mundane, so practical?
Is it a failure of writing, you mean?
Yeah, or is it, in fact, the ultimate point?
I think it is entirely the point, and it's this brilliant piece of psychological realism disguised as absurdity. Gregor's immediate thoughts are shockingly utilitarian, right? And they reveal the true horror, not of the transformation, but of his pre-metamorphosis existence. He exclaims, "Oh God," but he immediately finishes that thought by musing about his strenuous career as a traveling salesman.
So the "oh God" isn't about being a bug, it's about the job.
It seems to be. He's utterly preoccupied by his resentment for his job. He sees his employer as a despot, a monster who demands unwavering subservience.
His inner monologue focuses entirely on the grueling nature of his work. The constant early mornings, the bad food, the hostile hotels, the lack of any real human connection.
He wishes he could quit, but he feels trapped, utterly trapped by the one thing that defines him to his family, the debt.
That debt. It's like the elephant in the room, or maybe the beetle in the room.
Exactly. It's the golden chain that binds him. His entire identity, or at least the identity his family values, is tied to his role as a provider, working off his bankrupt father's debts. He even thinks, if he didn't have his parents to think about, he would have given notice long ago.
And he's calculating, even as he's struggling to figure out how to move his own new horrible body, that he needs to work another 5 or 6 years just to pay off that debt.
Incredible focus, isn't it?
So his first thought, after realizing he's this massive insect, isn't existential, it's economic.
Yeah.
First of all, though, I've got to get up. My train leaves at 5.
Yes.
He feels his absence only as a financial provider, not as a son, a brother, or even just a person. The internal panic isn't, what am I? It's, how will I get to work? How will I provide? It's all based on productivity.
And this functional perspective, this is the core symbolism laid bare right at the start. This opening sequence suggests that Gregor was already so utterly controlled by the obligations of his life, his strenuous career, the family debt, that his human identity, his very being as a person with thoughts and feelings beyond work, was lost long before the physical change.
Oh.
The transformation into vermin is symbolically just the literal physical manifestation of that functional, alienated, and ultimately expendable existence he was already living. He was already a creature of utility. Now he just looks the part.
And the external pressure doesn't wait for him to process this symbolic realization, does it? Soon enough, the real world intrudes.
In the form of the chief clerk, yeah. He arrives at the apartment, indignant, outraged about Gregor's unexcused absence. This representative of the bureaucracy, the system, it's relentless.
He really is. The clerk, this avatar of the economic system, is there purely to ensure productivity isn't disrupted.
Absolutely. And Gregor, trapped in his room, he attempts to communicate with the clerk and his family from behind the door. He tries to explain, to excuse himself, but all they hear are these incomprehensible vocalizations.
Like an animal sound.
Yeah. The text describes it as pained and thin, something clearly not human.
And that inability to communicate, that's just tragic. When Gregor finally manages the immense effort, it takes pages, doesn't it? Just showing the sheer difficulty of simple movement now.
The labor involved is huge.
He drags himself across the floor and manages to open the door. And the clerk's reaction.
Pure horror. He flees the apartment, screaming. Understandable, maybe, but telling.
But the key moment of confrontation, the one that really sets the tone for the family's reaction, is when Mr. Samsa, the father, reacts. Not with pity, not with concern.
But with violence, immediate violence. He wields a walking stick and with these forceful shoves drives the injured Gregor back into the room through the narrow doorway, badly scraping him in the process.
So from the very second his functionality is gone, the moment he can't do his job, he's treated with disgust, force, and absolute rejection.
That's it. He's locked away. The door is slammed shut.
And thus the physical transformation is complete and the emotional transformation of the family, well, that really begins. Now we have to move to one of the central and frankly quite frustrating mysteries of the novella. And it ties directly into these themes of alienation and identity. What exactly did Gregor Samsa become? As readers, you feel this desperate need for a biological classification.
You really do. But it's a deliberate ambiguity, isn't it? And one that Kafka himself fiercely guarded. We know he was very specific about it.
How so?
Well, he wrote to his editor before publication explicitly saying the insect is not to be drawn. He absolutely did not want any definitive visual image on the cover or anywhere else.
He wanted the horror to be formed entirely in the reader's mind.
Exactly. Let the imagination do the terrifying work. And in English translations, you see translators wrestling with this ambiguity. He's called a vermin, an insect, a dung beetle, a bug, all at various points in the narrative.
And the confusion is baked right into the original German text itself, I understand. The original term, ungeheures Ungeziefer.
That's the one. And sources note that this phrase poses one of the greatest challenges to the translator because it has layers of meaning, layers of sort of cultural resonance.
What kind of layers?
Well, the word Ungeziefer itself carries these ancient connotations. It's derived from a Middle High German word that means sacrificial animal, an animal not suitable for sacrifice, unclean.
Wow, sacrificial.
Yeah. But in modern use, it just describes nasty, creepy, crawly things, or pests, unwanted things. And then you add ungeheuers, meaning monstrous or gigantic.
And the English word vermin doesn't quite capture all that, does it? It often makes you think of rodents, like rats or mice.
Which is distinct from an insect, right? It adds another layer of visual uncertainty. And you see this difficulty played out in the sheer variety of translations. Someone counted over 16 different ways that phrase has been rendered in English.
16? Like what?
Oh. Gigantic insect, monstrous vermin, giant bug, monstrous cockroach, gargantuan pest. The list goes on.
That vast array of interpretations really shows how much artistic freedom Kafka granted or maybe forced onto the reader by being so deliberately vague.
He really did.
But okay, if we are seeking a literal classification, maybe against Kafka's wishes, we have to talk about Vladimir Nabokov, the great literary critic, but also...
The renowned entomologist, a butterfly expert specifically.
Right, and he rejected the purely symbolic readings and went full scientist on the text.
Nabokov's analysis is fascinating because he basically treated the text like field notes from an expedition. He looked at the textual details. Gregor's hard, armor-like back, his difficulty opening the door. Nabokov argued a flat cockroach could hide more easily. His apparent inability to fly well despite having wings under the shell, the description of his many thin legs.
And what did he conclude?
Based on all that, Nabokov concluded that Gregor was specifically not a cockroach, which is a common assumption. Instead, he argued Gregor was a large beetle, possibly a type of beetle capable of flight, though clumsy at it, with wings hidden under his elytra, his shell.
He even drew it, didn't he?
He did. Nabokov drew a detailed sketch of the creature he envisioned, estimating him to be just over 3 feet long, a substantial creature.
It's incredible that a piece of literary analysis could involve actual entomology, but does seeking this specific biological answer ultimately feel a bit counterproductive to Kafka's larger mission? If Kafka wanted ambiguity, should we sort of reject Nabokov's specific beetle designation?
Well, that's the critical tension right there, isn't it? Nabokov offers specificity, which is satisfying in a way. But if we connect this back to the bigger picture, the meaning of this unnaming, this refusal to classify, is profound.
How so?
The fact that the narrator, and even Gregor himself, cannot precisely describe his new condition. It signifies the sheer difficulty of coming to terms with one's identity when that identity becomes alienating or unrecognizable, either to oneself or to others.
So trying to pin down a specific species misses the point.
In many ways, yes. To try and locate a specific biological classification is, as some critics put it, antithetical to Kafka's construction. The story thrives on the terror of the vague, the unknown, the unclassifiable.
And it's the difference between a literal truth and a symbolic truth, maybe. The fact that he dies in this ambiguous, unnameable form suggests he was just wholly swallowed by the obligations and pressures that twisted him into something that couldn't even be properly filed or cataloged by the bureaucratic world he served.
Exactly. And this inability to name the creature, this ambiguity, it almost gives his family permission to define him only in functional terms, or rather by his lack of function.
Which brings us right back to the family.
And nowhere is this functional definition, this conditional value, more evident than in the emotional and structural breakdown of the Samsa family unit in the wake of his transformation.
Okay, so once Gregor's transformation solidifies, once it becomes terrifyingly clear this isn't just a temporary illness he'll snap out of,
Yeah.
the true focus of the story really shifts, doesn't it? It moves to the family, the Samsas, and their own cruel metamorphosis.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the focus immediately becomes financial, almost brutally so. And that economic shift dictates the emotional shift within the family.
How does that play out?
Well, Gregor's transformation instantly strips the family of its sole income source. He was the breadwinner, supporting everyone. Suddenly, that's gone. This forces the father, the mother, and eventually Greet, the sister, to all get jobs.
The father hadn't worked for years, right?
Yeah. For 5 years. Mr. Samsa had apparently been dormant, retired after his business failed. We learn later he was hoarding a small amount of secret savings, but publicly he was inactive. Now he's forced back into wearing a uniform, getting a job as a bank attendant.
And the month.
The mother takes up sewing, doing piecework at home, exhausting herself, and Greet, the young sister, gets a job as a salesgirl. This sudden reversal of fortune, this loss of their provider, is the engine that drives the family's rapid decline in compassion towards Gregor.
Let's focus extensively on Greet, Gregor's younger sister, because she is perhaps the most crucial character outside of Gregor himself. She undergoes the most dynamic and, frankly, the most upsetting transformation.
Definitely the most dynamic, and initially she shows the most sympathy, or at least the most action.
Right, she steps up first.
Her initial role is defined by this sense of duty, maybe even sacrifice. She becomes Gregor's sole caretaker. She volunteers to bring him food.
Which he only likes if it's rotten.
Yeah.
Wow, that's another disturbing detail.
Yes. His tastes change completely. She brings him rotten scraps and garbage that he, as the vermin, now prefers. And she cleans his room initially. She even starts removing furniture from his room, thinking she's helping him, giving him more space to crawl around on the walls and ceiling, which is his new kind of animalistic pastime.
Is she doing it purely out of love?
That's the question. It seems to come from a place of filial duty, certainly. But some analysis suggests it also comes from a sudden sense of importance. For the first time, she is indispensable to the family unit. She has a role, a purpose.
But that initial willingness, that sense of purpose, it doesn't last long, does it?
Not at all. The sources make it clear it fades quickly, often within weeks. The care becomes a profound burden, a chore. And she grows increasingly impatient and negligent.
You see it in her actions, the little things.
Absolutely. The physical signs of her resentment are telling. She starts leaving his room in increasing disarray, almost like she can't be bothered anymore. Sometimes, the text suggests, out of spite.
And her disgust becomes more obvious.
Palpable and overt, yes. She refuses to enter the room fully, if she can help it. She throws the window open immediately upon entry, even in winter, to avoid feeling nauseous from the smell or presumably the sight of him, especially if he's in plain sight. She stops speaking to him directly. She consciously ignores the needs he obviously cannot articulate. This shift from the seemingly empathetic sister to this resentful, burdened nurse, it's chilling to watch unfold.
And it all comes to a head, doesn't it, when the family starts taking in lodgers to make ends meet.
The 3 lodgers. Yes, 3 rather severe, demanding gentlemen who basically take over the apartment. Greet, who is a talented violinist, plays for them one evening, hoping to perhaps soothe them or entertain them.
And Gregor hears the music from his room.
Yes, and he's deeply moved by it. He yearns for that connection, for beauty, for something human. In a final, desperate attempt to connect, perhaps through art, he drags himself out of his room to hear her better.
And the lodgers see him.
They see him, they are disgusted naturally, they immediately give notice, threatening not to pay rent. And at that moment, Greet completely breaks.
This is your turning point.
This is the moment of her ultimate betrayal. Greet, enraged by his intrusion, by the mess he's made, by the threat he now poses to the family's new, fragile income stream, she declares her total abandonment of him.
What does she say?
She's the first one to explicitly suggest that they must get rid of it.
Yep.
She says, we can't go on like this. And crucially, I won't utter my brother's name in the presence of this monster, and so all I say is, we have to try and get rid of it. She refuses him, even the name brother.
Wow. Get rid of it. Dehumanizing him completely.
Utterly. And literary critics, like Nabokov, we mentioned him earlier, he argued that Greet, not the father, should actually be considered the cruelest person in the story precisely for this moment, for backstabbing Gregor after initially seeming to care.
Her initial desire to contribute just gives way to this utter, cold resentment. And her declaration, that's what pushes Gregor over the edge, isn't it?
It seems to be the final straw. Hearing that from her, the person who was closest to him, it prompts him to retreat to his room and essentially plan his own death through starvation.
And the reward for her shift, for moving from compassionate sister to cold pragmatist.
It's swift and disturbingly explicit in the text. The moment Gregor dies, the very next morning, the parents suddenly look at Greet and realize she has blossomed into a pretty and shapely girl.
Like they're seeing her properly for the first time now that Gregor's gone.
Exactly. And they immediately turn their attention to the next societal obligation, finding her a suitable husband. Her metamorphosis from a girl living in her brother's shadow, dependent on his income, into a young woman ready for the marriage market is completed. Tragically and profitably for the family's future prospects, it's fueled by her brother's demise.
Chilling. Now moving to Mr. Samsa, the father. His transformation is also quite physical, isn't it?
Very much so. Before Gregor's change, he was depicted as retired, complacent, maybe even a bit weak and overweight, shuffling around the house.
Yeah.
Afterwards, he forces himself back to work, gets this rigid bank messenger's uniform.
The uniform seems important.
It does. It makes him stand up straight, command a certain authority he lacked before. It's like the uniform armors him, much like Gregor Schell, but in a socially acceptable way.
And his attitude towards Gregor? We know he was the first to react with violence.
Yes. He seemed to regard Gregor primarily as a source of income even when he was human. After the transformation, his view shifts entirely to disgust and fear. It confirms this complete breakdown of the father-son bond.
His most devastating act against Gregor is the apple incident, right?
Oh, absolutely. In a fit of rage and panic, he starts hurling fruit at Gregor as Gregor is retreating. One apple becomes lodged firmly in Gregor's back in his shell.
And it stays there.
It stays there. No one removes it. It becomes infected. It festers. The sources stress the symbolism here. The apple acts as this constant, visible reminder of his father's rejection, the family's violence against him. The wound is grievous and never properly heals, likely contributing significantly to his eventual starvation and death.
It feels almost biblical, doesn't it? Like a fruit from a poisoned tree, confirming he's been cast out of the family paradise.
That's a powerful reading, yeah. It marks his complete expulsion.
And that strained relationship between father and son. It's also deeply autobiographical for Kafka, isn't it? People often read Mr. Samsa through the lens of Kafka's own life.
That's widely accepted, yes. Kafka famously struggled with a deep sense of personal inadequacy and failure, constantly battling the influence of his own powerful, demanding, and often judgmental father. The hostility and the sort of authoritarian nature of Mr. Samsa are seen as a direct reflection of the alienation Kafka felt within his own family.
So the novella becomes, in part, a way for him to process or express that sense of familial oppression.
It certainly seems plausible, a cathartic exercise, perhaps.
Okay, and Mrs. Samsa, the mother. How does she fit into this family dynamic?
She's portrayed as much more submissive, caught in the middle. She suffers from asthma, which seems to flare up under stress, making her physically frail. And emotionally, she seems torn.
Torn between what?
Between her maternal sympathy, her instinct to care for her child, and her overwhelming fear and revulsion at Gregor's new form. She wants to help, she expresses concern, but her body often fails her. She faints, she has asthma attacks.
So she attempts maternal duty, but ultimately can't overcome her disgust.
Pretty much. She tries to enter the room sometimes, she wants to see him, but the sight of him crawling on the walls is just too much for her. There's a key scene where Greet decides to remove furniture, and Gregor tries desperately to save a beloved framed picture from being taken off his wall.
Another attempt to cling to his human past.
Exactly. And in the commotion, Mrs. Samsa sees him clinging to the picture on the wall and just loses consciousness out of sheer terror and shock. Her maternal impulse simply cannot overcome her physical and emotional revulsion. She's trapped by her own fear.
And finally, there's one other character who interacts with Gregor. The charwoman. She's different.
She's the outlier, yeah. The only character completely unafraid of Gregor.
Why do you think that is?
Well, she's fascinating because she's depicted as this absolute pragmatist. She's an old widowed lady who takes over the heavy household duties after the previous maid quits in terror. She seems almost unfazed by Gregor.
Like she's seen worse.
Perhaps, or maybe because she's an outsider to the family's emotional turmoil, accustomed to life's ugliness and the transactional reality of her own existence as a servant. She accepts Gregor's changed state almost as a normal part of his existence, calling him things like old dung beetle.
She's the one who finds him dead, isn't she?
Yes. She's the one who ultimately discovers Gregor's starved, desiccated body one morning. And her reaction, cold, clinical practicality. She announces his death almost cheerfully and then disposes of the corpse by sweeping him up without any ceremony or emotion, just deals with it.
So Gregor dies of starvation, suffering from that festering apple wound, and more than anything, sheer neglect. The text is heartbreaking at the end, isn't it? It notes that he dies understanding he is no longer wanted, that he's a burden.
Yet somehow the narrator insists he's still full of tenderness and love for his family, even as he consciously chooses his death to relieve them of the burden he perceives himself to be.
He fades away for their benefit.
He does. And the family's reaction is the final, chilling punctuation mark on the entire plot.
They're relieved.
Utterly relieved and optimistic. They decide collectively to take the day off work, a little holiday almost, earned by his death. They immediately start planning a move to a smaller, cheaper apartment, shedding the place where the tragedy occurred.
And they turn their focus immediately to Greet's future.
Yes, to her blooming allurance and her profitable marriage prospects. Gregor's demise isn't just a relief, it's their path back to composure, stability, and potential material gain through Greet.
The staying power of the Metamorphosis isn't just in that shocking plot, though. It's in how readily it lends itself to so many different critical lenses, each one revealing maybe a darker truth about modern society. Let's start with the one that gave us the term itself, existentialism and absurdism.
Right, the Kafkaesque. That term is now part of the English vernacular, isn't it? It describes that feeling of alienation, of exclusion of the individual when they're faced with these vast modern bureaucracies or just incomprehensible social systems.
And the foundational absurdity here starts with the unexplained transformation itself. There's no backstory, no scientific cause, no reason given, no cure sought. It simply is.
It just happens. And that unexplained nature is key to the absurdity.
But the true absurdity, maybe, strikes not just from the physical change itself, but from the fact that Gregor's entire life undergoes this catastrophic fall because he loses his convivial human appearance. That loss triggers his loss of value.
Exactly. He was already alienated by his work, wasn't he? Constantly thinking about his unbearable situation at work, the drudgery, the lack of meaning. But the physical change makes that alienation absolute and irreversible. He's stripped of the ability to participate in society, in the economy, in the family, which is perhaps the ultimate absurdity we all fear on some level, becoming useless.
And his death, in this absurdist context, is seen as the tool he uses to escape that absurdity, to restore balance to the family's condition.
You could certainly read it that way. He complies with their more or less blatant wish, as the text hints, by starving himself. Some critics suggest that the relentless clock-watching, the pressure, the self-renunciation required by his job had already turned Gregor into a kind of vermin before he physically metamorphosed.
So the job was the first transformation.
In a sense, yes. A transformation into a functional cog. The physical change just made it visible. The ultimate absurdity is realized when the family is demonstrably better off financially and emotionally without the person they supposedly loved.
That's bleak. Okay, next, we absolutely have to analyze the story as a profound metaphor for disability and social rejection. This ties directly into that critical look at economic utility we've been talking about.
Yes, it's a very strong reading. Gregor moves instantly from being an able-bodied breadwinner, a producer of capital for the family, to being seen as a parasitic burden, someone who consumes resources but produces nothing.
And this connects deeply to a sort of Marxist perspective, doesn't it? Where human existence and value in a capitalist society are often directly proportional to your economic value, your ability to produce capital.
Precisely. Gregor's inability to be a productive member of society instantly justifies, in the family's mind at least, their contempt and their eventual decision to isolate and effectively abandon him.
That immediate isolation, locking him in his room, neglecting his care, treating his space like a storage closet, it mirrors how society has historically treated disabled individuals, viewing them as an extra burden when they can't contribute economically.
It does. The text really emphasizes the physical and emotional cost the family takes on because he can no longer work. The father, mother, and sister all have to take these exhausting, menial jobs to replace his income, and their resentment grows with their exhaustion.
And they start prioritizing paying strangers, the lodgers, over their own kin.
Yes. When they take in the lodgers, these three harsh, demanding men, the family essentially prioritizes the income these strangers provide over Gregor's well-being, basically trapping Gregor behind this wall of pure economics. His needs become entirely secondary.
And crucially, Gregor's own distress seems driven less by his new body. I mean, he adapts surprisingly quickly to crawling on the walls and ceilings, finding some odd pleasure in it.
He does adapt physically.
But more by the immense lack of compassion he faces from his family. That isolation, that hostile treatment, it multiplies his own feelings of shame and guilt, leading him to believe he truly holds no place in the world anymore.
Which culminates in Greet's declaration, "We can't carry on like this. We have to try and get rid of it." His self-denial, his fatal hunger strike, it's almost like he's complying with that cruel societal expectation that the unproductive should just disappear.
It's a powerful critique of how society can value function over personhood. We also have to place the novella firmly in the context of early 20th century modernism. It was published in 1915, right in the midst of huge societal shifts.
Yes, the story really showcases the sense of disintegration and dehumanization of society that many felt was taking place during the scientific and industrial revolutions. The individual often felt swallowed by these massive impersonal systems.
Modernist writers often sought to depict society in a state of disintegration and dehumanization. And Kafka seems to be doing exactly that.
Yeah.
Think about Gregor's existence before the transformation.
Right. It was already dehumanizing. A life of constant travel for work, mechanical routines, perpetual fear of his boss, hostile work environments, superficial relationships. He is the perfect creature of a functionalistic professional life.
Vexed with the fear of making mistakes, reduced entirely to his professional responsibilities, rather than his actual personality or desires.
You could even argue his subconscious rebellion against this unbearable work situation is the transformation itself. It's a bizarre way out, a way to escape the system, even if it means becoming functionally useless and monstrous.
But even as a bug, he can't escape the framework, can he? He's still tormented by the societal pressures, the expectations of duty and debt that define his human life. He worries about the family's finances even from inside his shell.
He does. The banishment of Gregor, the way the family handles it, shows how Kafka traps the reader in this inhumane world, exposing the cruel essence and superficiality of everyday circumstances, especially perhaps the class struggle of the era.
How does class fit in?
Well, the middle class, represented by the Samsas, is shown to value reputation, appearances, and income above genuine kinship and love. Their primary concern, after Gregor changes, is how it affects their social standing and their finances.
And finally, let's quickly revisit Vladimir Nabokov's idea, which offers a distinctly artistic interpretation. He saw the narrative as representing the artist's struggle for existence.
Yes, the struggle of the sensitive artist in a society filled with narrow-minded, pragmatic people Philistines, essentially, who misunderstand and ultimately destroy him step by step.
And this interpretation finds a lot of weight in Kafka's own life, right?
Absolutely. We know Kafka himself struggled desperately to establish his identity as a writer. He deeply resented his day job as a lawyer and insurance bureaucrat, believing it actively prevented him from devoting himself fully to his art, to his true calling.
So if we read Gregor as the artist, or at least the sensitive intellectual, the vermin form represents the grotesque, unusable, misunderstood form of that inner life when it's confronted with the cold, hard, utilitarian demands of the bourgeoisie world.
That's a compelling way to put it. Perhaps Gregor, the artistic dreamer who secretly wanted to quit his job, who felt deep emotions, who dreamed of sending his sister Greet to the music conservatory to develop her talent. Maybe he became a Beatle because his real self, the sensitive soul, was perceived as grotesque and alien and fundamentally useless to the narrow-minded, functional world of his family and his boss.
It's a powerful lens. Adds another layer of tragedy to his inability to communicate.
So, if we try to synthesize all these different viewpoints, these critical lenses, the powerful takeaway seems to be that the Metamorphosis is not just a weird, strange story about a guy turning into a bug. It's a profound, deeply unsettling exploration of conditional love.
Conditional on what?
Conditional on utility. Conditional on economic function. It explores the terrifying reality that human value, in the modern world Kafka depicted, is often seen as directly proportional to economic usefulness.
When Gregor loses his function as the breadwinner, he loses his value as a human being in the eyes of those closest to him, regardless of all his prior sacrifice for them.
Exactly. His past efforts count for nothing once he becomes a burden.
And the novella's unsettling nature, the reason it sticks with you and makes you uncomfortable, that's its real power, isn't it? By maintaining the ambiguity of the creature, by refusing easy answers, Kafka forces you, the reader, to focus instead on the truly inhumane world around Gregor.
He exposes the cruel essence and sometimes the sheer superficiality of everyday circumstances, of family ties, of economic necessity.
The death of Gregor, which he chooses but which they all desired, allowed his family to discover composure, as the text says, and emotional, even financial gains. It demonstrates the profound relief they felt at removing what had become an economic and social burden.
His physical distortion, his otherness, became the source of unbearable discomfort for everyone around him, leading inexorably to his self-reduction, his fading away, his eventual non-existence.
The family's subsequent actions, the immediate relief, the shared nature of out of the city, the optimistic planning for a new future, they show that, from their perspective, the tragedy was almost necessary for their survival and future happiness.
It's a deep, dark commentary on what we might be willing to sacrifice or who we might be willing to discard for our own stability and comfort.
And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. The title is The Metamorphosis, plural. Given that Gregor accepts his physical state, but ultimately languishes and dies in it, while Greet matures and blossoms, the father finds renewed purpose in work, and the entire family unit is wholly transformed, albeit through tragedy. We have to ask, was Gregor's shocking physical change the actual metamorphosis Kafka was most interested in? Or was the ultimate, perhaps necessary, and certainly profitable transformation the one that occurred in the remaining Semsa family members, catalyzed by Gregor's ordeal?
Kafka, in his typical fashion, leaves that answer, much like the creature's true biological identity, entirely up to you to uncover or decide in your own reading. It's a question that lingers long after you've finished the last page.